We started early because Justin Stiles is our very special guest, and he is both on the podcast and solo parenting right now. And he just said less than 50% chance that he makes it through the entire podcast. So, Laura, we will save if there's anything coming up for the end so that we can jump right into. We're doing a book discussion. The Great DeChurching. It's making some waves in people who like to read books on the church. Recently, our life group read it. Justin and I in our life group. I think, Laura, you read it before my life group read it.
Yeah.
And the subtitle kind of says it all. Who's leaving? Why are they going? And what will it take to bring them back? Obviously, maybe you know people who used to be in the church and no longer are, not just meaning Gateway, but they could live in another state. And this kind of goes through all of that. A de-churched person, since that's the word on there, is someone who used to go to church at least once a month, but now goes less than a year. That's how the authors define de-churched person. And that used to go once a month, now goes less than once a year, represents about 15% of American adults who are alive today, which is around 40 million people who have stopped going to church in the last 25 years. They used to go once a month. They no longer go, they go less than once a year. And 40 million is a lot of people. To give you an idea, that's more people have left the church in the last 25 years than all of the people who became Christians during the first Great Awakening, which was the 1730s to 1770s in our country, to about 2.5 million. The second Great Awakening, 1795 to 1835, about 14.9 million. And everybody who came to faith during the Billy Graham Crusades. You add all those together, and more people have left the church in the last 25 years than everybody who became Christians in those three big movements of our history of Christianity here in the U.S. Something else before we jump into discussion with Laura and Justin. No theological tradition, so it doesn't matter if you're Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, non-denominational. Doesn't matter. No age group, no ethnicity, no political affiliation, no education level, no geographic location, no income bracket escaped the de-churching that's going on in our country. So this is no one is left not affected by this. Everybody's affected. Though by generation, baby boomers are de-churching in larger numbers, with more than 35% of baby boomers who are alive today, they have stopped going to a local church. They used to, they no longer do. So of our generations, baby boomers are the largest to be de-churching. Another study, the Cooperative Congressional Election Study from 2008 to 2021, discovered that self-identified evangelical Republicans who seldom or never attend church has more than doubled in the last 13 years, from 12% to 27%. So probably many who are listening to this would be in that group, just to let you know that a little over a quarter of people who are self-identified evangelical Republicans are de-churching. And then what was kind of crazy in the book is that more than 25% of people who are de-churched, no longer going to church, and say they are evangelicals, they believe, more than 25%, that the U.S. should be declared a Christian nation. And why that is so odd is because these are people saying the U.S. should be a Christian nation, but we're not going to church. And so it's a little bit, it's like saying that the U.S. should be a vegetarian nation, but we eat meat. Like, it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And Gallup has tracked American religious membership for many, many years, and has found that for the first time in 8 decades, more adults in the U.S. don't go to church than do. And so for the first time in 80 years, less people are going to church than do. So that's sort of what this book is. That's the problem that it's identifying. There is some hope in it, which we will get to. But I get to play questioner, and Laura gets to be in the hot seat with Justin. And so there are a few different kinds of groups that are mentioned who have de-churched. The three that kind of, or four that kind of relate to who most of us would know, are cultural Christians, dechurched mainstream evangelicals, ex-evangelicals, and then dechurched mainline Protestants or Catholics, probably in there. There's another group, BIPOC as well, that have dechurched. We can't cover all of those and all of their nuances. If you want to do that, get a copy of the book. Is there a group that surprised you? And if so, which of these groups surprised you and why? Laura, why don't you go first? Justin is muted. Oh, now he's unmuted.
Now he's unmuted. You still want me to go first?
Go for it.
Okay. So for me, I said that the mainstream evangelicals surprised me the most. My tendency is to lump cultural Christians and mainstream evangelicals together in the same pot, but this book separated them. I think I would tend to do that because I have this. This probably says more about my own judgment towards people than than anything. But I tend to feel like, well, if these mainstream evangelicals really had the orthodox beliefs that they say they do, then they wouldn't so easily just quit going to church. Like they would feel like they're missing something. But they seem to actually look a lot like evangelicals that still go to church. And so it was just surprising to me that there was this whole group of people that have orthodox beliefs. They pray regularly, they read their Bibles. They just got out of the habit of going to church. And so it might be because they moved. It might be, I think, COVID or, things like that. They just got out of the habit. So something else that surprised me, though, because you were asking what surprised us about it, is they don't have any bad experiences with the church. And so 100% of them said that they would be willing to return to church at some point in time. So we'll get to hope later, but that's actually kind of a hopeful thing.
So you're actually showing two ways we mix up this group. The cultural Christians usually don't have orthodox beliefs, and they stop going. And so sometimes we think this group is like them. But then the other part, that they don't have ill feelings, the ill-feeling people are the ex-evangelicals who are very antagonistic towards the church. And you hear a lot of them in news bites and all that kind of stuff. But there is this sort of quiet group. You mentioned moving because COVID is so recent, and this, includes what COVID did, but it's 25 years that the moving is a big one for most people. Yeah. I don't think that we realize how much a move because of work, relocation, whatever, and the not going to church habit, that's really a moment that makes or breaks people's relationship with the church. Justin, what about you?
When it came to the different groups, some different points about the cultural Christians was what stuck out to me. There was a section in there where it talked about, hey, they may not accept your nudge to go back to church right away. They might need your dinner table more. So, they're willing to engage in conversation, maybe not in church, but maybe about church, off campus. And it may take some warming up to the idea, but they're open, like Laura mentioned. And for folks that may not have great orthodoxy, there's still belief there, but it just needs to be kind of brought out a little bit. And they need some warmth. They need some warmth in their life where maybe they weren't feeling that when they were part of a church community.
Yes, especially we keep hearing now there is antagonism towards the church in our country, but when we're talking about 40 million people who have stopped going to church, that's a big chunk. Good odds that you could talk to somebody who doesn't go to church and isn't antagonistic. And so it just amazed me how many people used to go to church and aren't really angry. Really just need an invitation. Somebody wanted to have a conversation with them. So again, there's other groups. We talked about cultural Christians and mainline Christians. And so if you want to look at any other ones, be sure to check out the book. So it sounds like it could be a depressing book if somebody's listening to this. 40 million people have left the church, and so not exactly what you want to read before you go to bed for like happy dreams or something. So what are some reasons that you are hopeful for our country and its spiritual state, or maybe where we're headed?
Justin, you can take this one first.
Sure. I think wherever people land on, the reasons why they left church or what they think about church, there's always a search for community. Maybe they didn't have that. Maybe that wasn't offered to them. Maybe they didn't like the community that they had at church. They're finding it elsewhere. People have a need to be in community. They might be finding it within clusters of school friends. They might be finding it with children's sports teams and parents that align with them there. They might be finding it in different groups that they're in. They'll likely admit that those aren't bringing a sense of lasting fulfillment. Those can be pretty temporary, and there's gonna be disappointments in those types of communities too. So I think as we talk about church, within the walls of Gateway, we're talking a lot about being a family. I would love if that kind of language would be something that a lot of churches would be about. I think that is particularly attractive. I think when you talk about what it means to be a family, and then you actually do and show those things, that's what can be an invitation to those. Particularly, with our local church, I like what we're doing and how we're talking about it, and the examples we're showing to people, the stories that we're hearing about that. So that's what gives me hope, is thinking about how the church can be a family where it wasn't, because I think that will really help bring people back where they felt cast aside.
Yeah, I talked a lot about belonging, and you mentioned all kinds of things. It mentions different, even sports for adults, whether it's a running club or all kinds of places that we're just looking for people with like-minded interests, because we were created to be in relationships with others. Laura, what about you? Hope for the state of our country's spiritual condition?
Yep. Pretty much it's almost exactly what Justin said. So just the fact that people, what I said earlier, a lot of people are willing to come back to church. But that when you read the book, they will go into a lot of the reasons why people left. And so many of them are relational. And so I thought to Justin about we want to be disciples who are family. I thought about that. I thought about, I'm pretty sure that we either did a series of podcasts on the compelling community, or we did an episode on that book when the elders and staff read that a couple years ago. But I thought a lot about that book, and just if as a church we can really do it well. So we're talking about it now. If we can really do community well, then that's very compelling to people. And I think that it will draw people to the church or bring people back to the church.
Yeah. When I think back to when I moved to Michigan, there was a period where I didn't have a church. I was seeking a church out, and as I read, in the book, lots of things popped up about moving. Moving is a huge reason. If you don't have someone helping you get a church, if you know no one in your area, that's going to be a place where you're going to struggle. And I've liked what we've done as shepherding elders. When someone does leave, we follow up with them and we say, "Hey, do you have a church yet? Do you need?" And we're connected to EPC. Do you need? Is there an EPC church in the area? If not, is there a church that we can connect you with that would be similar? So we don't let go of that member until they give us a head nod. Yep, we have found a church, or we're on our way to finding a church. And that I think that is so helpful when you've got someone in your rearview mirror, cheering you on to make sure that you're finding a church community. Because I think we can all identify at some level, whether we've moved or not, how hard that is to be in a new spot where no one, and you've got no one dragging you or pushing you or encouraging you to stick with church.
I was over at North Main this morning, and our North Main campus, and a young lady who is graduating with a master's degree, graduate level at ONU, happened to have a card for me. It was her last Sunday because she has her final exams. I guess graduation is in 2 weeks, but she's going back home from West Virginia. And so this was the move away, and just talked a lot about thankful for the community, for some place to feel like she belonged, because ONU, Justin, you went there. It's a small enough school, but when you're at a graduate level in a small school, you even feel more like a fish out of water, and much less having moved away from home. And so I was thankful to read her note to me, just thanking us for Gateway being a place where she's felt like she belonged. The relational piece, it's great for the bringing in the part that I remember, and this was true, I think, for every category, kind of like the move. Another top near the top was parents could, for better or worse, quite the deterrent of someone continuing in the church. Usually if every time like adult children are over at your house, if all you're talking is politics or other divisive stuff, that turns them off from your faith. And what was interesting is that it's an equal political party offender problem, meaning for the white evangelicals who are Republican, their kids are turned off with talk about that party. And then in the BIPOC chapter, their kids are turned off by all of the Democrat talk. And so that piece, if I could just give a word of advice to parents who have adult children, and maybe you've seen them stop going to church, just watch the politics talking when you're around your kids, because that is just according to this, it's a high reason why your kids, they see politics and Christianity so intermingled that if they disagree with your politics, they assume they must disagree with your faith. And we don't want to make that an obstacle. Let's make sure that it's a little bit more clear, just for their sake and their connection to the church. And so again, read more. If you don't believe me, read the data that's in here, and you'll see that it's there. What's a key takeaway that you would want everyone to know from the book? Justin went first last time. Laura, you get to go first this time.
Okay. So I hope I'm able to articulate this well. In my head, it makes sense. I tried to make some notes about it, but I feel like it sort of boiled down to the need to be, the way I worded it in the notes was that we need to be students of the culture and learn to listen well. So I don't remember where, I think it was a podcast or something, an article I was reading or something at work a while ago. And it mentioned 1 Chronicles 12:32, which is really interesting. It's like in the middle of some kind of a census or genealogy of some sort. But there's this little sentence that it's talking about the men from the tribe of Issachar. And that says that they were men who understood the times and knew what Israel should do. And that has stuck with me, like to be able to read our culture, to understand what's happening, and then to be able to make decisions and know what to do about it. And that kind of leads me to, Josh, what you were just talking about, the sections in the book that talked about the people whose they were talking about their parents' faith, but I think it could apply to Christians in general. Some of the reasons, the top reasons that young people cited for being driven away from the church were their parents or Christians' inability to listen, their inability to engage with other viewpoints, and their lack of love, joy, gentleness, kindness, and generosity. And so it just seems like when Christians are known really for just being against something, and we don't even know how to listen to somebody else's point of view, even if we know going in that we're going to disagree with it. But to be able to really care enough about that person to listen to where they're coming from, and then to have the wisdom to see like what's really underneath that, and then to know how the gospel like answers the questions that they're really asking. I think if we can learn to do that, then maybe we would be able to help draw some people back to the church. Maybe they wouldn't leave in the first place if we were just a little kinder, a little more loving. There was a quote on page 146. It says, "If we hope to help other people, we must have our wits, reason, and faculties intact. This means we need an inner confidence in who we are, what we believe, and how we are to act. And when we possess that confidence, we can remain emotionally regulated and calm." I feel like I'm preaching to myself as much as anybody else there, because I do struggle to like listen to people that, that I disagree with. I just want to argue with them. So we just need to do better, I think, at that.
Laura, Justin, you may know as well. I'm doing an online preaching class, and a lot of it is about preaching in a post-Christian culture. It's a lot about what you're talking about. And there was I grabbed a screenshot of a document that was shared on cultural narratives that are often the question being asked and then the answer given by culture. And then it provides us opportunities. That's the knowing the culture of exposing where something's not there. So like one of them is, who am I? So identity question, right? And one of the answers is be true to yourself, to your inmost desires. Now, it's really easy to think of sexual identity and all this kind of stuff. And so a great example of how to make this, like you start talking about this, like identity, you're talking to somebody, be true to yourself. And maybe they want to, like, you're hearing the extreme, like sexual identity or something, like, oh, I don't want to touch that. And so what's a way to talk about it? And it was a great example. You're standing in a checkout line, if you still check out your stuff and don't just order it online or whatever. And you are literally in an identity crisis place in that checkout line. On one side of the checkout line are magazines with photoshopped beautiful men and women with abs showing. And there's this desire of they're beautiful, they're young, they're attractive, that I want to look like this. This is part of my identity. And then on the other side of the aisle are Kit Kat bars and Mr. Good bars and maybe Gatorade and all kinds of high calorie food. And I want that too. And so, which is my true self? Because at this point, there are two identities going on at once. I love the instant gratification of Reese's peanut butter cups, and I would love to have a six-pack and, like look like Ryan Gosling instead of Ryan Reynolds. And, and so like, but it's like, so which is my true self? And what it helps people to see in a lighthearted way is that even when it's sexual identity, it's not like it's 100% certain. They try to project that, just like the magazine cover tries to project something, and just like the candy is trying to project a different image, that they're all playing into this. And so you can start to expose that. Help me understand how you are certain with who you are, because a simple thing like a candy bar and a magazine cover can make me conflicted with which is my truest self. And to help them see that, knowing like there's too much pressure on ourselves to identify who our truest self is, that something else tells us what our truest self is, that we can't define that for ourselves. And so that was a simple one. Why are we here? Our culture says freedom. What's wrong with us? Culture says you got to be happy. You're just not happy. That's what's wrong with us. What will not put us right? All of the injustices in the world. So what will put us right? Having power, because then you can make sure that you have the justice that you deserve or think that you have. So it goes on with all these cultural narratives, but definitely seeing it where we don't just have to argue, but where we can say, okay, help me understand, be true to yourself, because everybody experiences the candy bar and the magazine cover, and maybe if they don't anymore, it's because they've given up on one of those as being a possibility. And they just given in completely to the other one. And that could either lead to things like anorexia or overworking out or binge eating, and neither one of those are their true self either. Justin, I hijacked it. Go ahead. What was takeaway for you?
I think the largest takeaway was there's no program, there's no system that's going to get 40 million people back to church. It's simply going to be a one-by-one approach where each of us have to take responsibility in our own local churches to invite those folks that we once knew in our church to come back. It's the personal invitation. It's the one-on-one conversation to talk about hey, why did you leave? Can we talk about that? Was it something where you felt hurt? Was it something where you feel disenfranchised with the church in some way? What is it that that compelled you to leave? And that relational aspect is going to be what helps bring them back, and it's going to take work and effort. There's not a magic solution, and I don't think the book ever proposed that there would be one. But it's just going to take a lot of effort and just willingness by those of us that are in the church to be a friend to those that are outside, that are willing to come back. They're just waiting on the invitation. So we have just as much responsibility as they do for their leaving. We have to reach out and bring them back. So it was something that I anticipated reading as I got into it, and there it was several times was, hey, they're waiting on us to invite them, and the conversations might look different depending on the reasons why they left, but they're looking for some deeper connection, and they're looking for that family feel inside the church.
And what I think that this book can help you do is, we've all had conversations, and maybe people listening as well. And the first thing that they tell you why they left the church isn't the actual thing. Like they don't mention the move because maybe they don't see it, or they, like the things that are over and over and over and over again in this, you may be able to hear, well, I didn't like that they stopped whatever program, whatever their church had going on, Sunday night potluck. Well, it really wasn't the potluck. It's usually never the potluck or something like that. It's something else that's going on, that this can help you to see. And again, the biggest concern is that we keep focusing on, not in this podcast, but I think as a church in the U.S., we focus on the young people not coming. This opened my eyes that we need to be worried about the older generation and the generation that is continuing to become the senior citizens in our country.
Mm-hmm.
They're stopping in mass numbers, and what that might mean for the baby boomer generation, who's in a generational life change. They're retiring. They're still taking care of their parents, and they're stopping going to church when they probably need a community more than ever because they're retired. They don't have their job as their community, and they're burdened with aging parents that they're trying to care for. So,
yeah. And I think too, for those in that generation, they need to stay plugged in, and not just for themselves, but I know that I very much enjoy and get a lot out of the wisdom that they have to offer. When we had Pastor Kevin and D'Amica here, they talked about, if you're a married couple, find a married couple friend that you can go to if you don't already have one. And, those that have gone before you and have a lot of life experience and wisdom to give, not only in that arena, but many arenas, just listening to their stories, their battles, their scars. They have a lot to offer the younger generations. And I hope that they recognize that, like they're needed for everybody else.
All right, last question. We're going to let Justin go first because he may have beat the odds here if he gets through this one. And you have to give all of your kids. Well, are you doing bedtime, or will your wife do bedtime? Because if she's doing it, you have to give them all lots of ice cream. But if you're doing it, don't.
Well, there is ice cream in the freezer that I said maybe we'll crack that open if we get through this podcast.
Okay, so they're eager. Last chapter in the book is titled 5 Exhortations to Church Leaders. Which of the exhortations stuck out to you the most, and why?
The one about shepherding your flock. There was a quote on 233: "We cannot shepherd people we do not know." And for those that don't know, at Gateway, the elders a few years ago, we decided to get to know our people. We wanted to be shepherding elders. We wanted to know our people. We wanted to know our flocks. It's more difficult and takes a lot more work as a part of a larger church with 2 campuses. But we've got a group of people that little by little we get to know. There's still a few folks I've not met face to face because of difficulty getting a hold of each other, but I've made a lot of progress. And when you finally make that connection, it's much easier to then take the conversation and take it forward and to ask more questions. So I was encouraged by that part of that last chapter was, hey, take your shepherding seriously. And I think we're doing that at Gateway. We're making progress, and we have more to do in that area. But you've got to, as leaders, we have to know the people that are coming so that we can care for them and meet their needs.
Yep. Yeah, that was an encouraging one to me as well. Laura, what about you?
Be patient. So I can be quick to sort of judge people and sort of write them off like, oh, they're not really that serious about their faith or whatever. They're not really with the program. So just move on, like focus your attention on the people that are here and that are serious. And so that was, it was just a good reminder to me that our spiritual lives are slow. It's often slow growth. And Josh, you and I were just talking maybe last week or the week before about someone that that for several years in your shepherding group hasn't really been all that involved and just recently has gotten involved. And it's like years it's taken. And I've seen, that's one story, but I've seen that and I know that it was a good reminder of that. And with myself too, not to give up on myself, but to remember that I just need to be patient because growth is slow.
I don't know if it's the book by the pastor where I got God Loves You and I Love You Too from, but a guy who wrote a book had been at his church for a long time. I remember a line being, one of the joys of pastoring one church for a long time, and it's sort of in this patience realm, is that you get to see people leave your church and then come back. And so there's a patience there as well, that they may leave and it's not for a good reason. And I remember in there being about, sometimes they'll come and say, hey, I was wrong. Sorry about that. But that only comes with being patient by also staying put yourself. And you get to see that in ministry over the long haul. Well, Justin, tell your kids they did a great job.
Okay.
5 of them, if listeners don't know. You go get ice cream out. Laura and I will do a what's coming up so that the kids don't ruin their ice cream possibilities in the last 10 seconds here.
Okay.
Thanks for being here, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
I actually don't even have anything coming up.
I do.
Okay, great.
We're off next week for Mother's Day.
There you go. Yes.
I bailed you out.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. That's it. See ya.